Welcome, everybody. Well, I know we said last week it was going to be the last session, but I thought we have to do a few more.
Oh, man, this subject.
The subject of self-transformation, because it's such a rich
Okay.
subject. And what we were doing is on the way to Shavuot, as we were going through the process of the Omer, part of receiving the Torah is, you've got to work on yourself to be able to receive new wisdom. And we talked about anger, and we talked about a spiritual approach to eating food, and we talked about all kinds of things. But now that we've received the Torah of Shavuot, doesn't mean we stop working on ourselves. We might as well
Yes, you
continue
have to be kind and patient.
kind of patient and working on all the different things.
That one page that we gave back,
What's that?
the one page that we returned for this one had, it made me think about it, it's talking about Shaddai
Yeah,
and the fact that, by looking at your mezuzot,
you should know you have enough, right? That
Right.
was
yeah,
that was the that was last week. Last week we looked at contentment or satisfaction, and the idea that the reason we have Shaddai on the mezuzot is die. We have enough. We've got what we need in our lives to live and to be, and it's a very intense and hard lesson, but very powerful lesson, and that we have in our lives. The
And
peace.
charity doesn't have to be money.
And yeah, so now and today we're looking at something that's kind of connected in some ways, with the idea of generosity, and not just. And we talk about generosity of spirit. Also, we talk about um, obviously generosity in deeds, as well as generosity in money. But why is generosity good for people?
Why is generosity?
Why is it good to be generous?
Because what goes around comes around, and if
Can't hear you.
I'll put up a little bit.
sorry, because what goes around comes around, right? That idea of karma.
Who's around
If
company?
you are in the habit of sharing your energy, your gifts, your stuff, your commitments, your time with others, then it comes back to you. It has a way of coming back to you.
Beautiful. Yeah, there's
Yeah,
a sense that there's a flow, right? Generosity is like a flow.
Yeah.
When you bring it to bear in your life, then
And it comes back to you. Yes.
do you mean in some kind of metaphysical way, or just because you help?
Both. I
Yeah.
mean it. I mean it every sense. Every sense. The actual doing, giving brings back to you physical stuff, but also in terms of gifts and blessings and opportunities. Or so has been my experience in life.
Where there's such a strong emphasis throughout the Talmud on giving, on charity, and obviously because the Jewish people have been through a lot of the last few thousand years and need help. But it says, right, that we have so many mitzvahs in the Torah, but giving to charity is equal to all the other mitzvahs put together. And
Is it?
tzedakah.
Is it?
I mean, it says that about a few other mitzvahs too. It says that, but it does say that about generosity. I mean, again, generosity is the reason I didn't call this charity, is because generosity is much wider, right? We'll be talking about that. So, let's get into it. Let's start the talk. And since Bonnie's not here and Alan's not here too, but you're in the hot seat.
sitting in Alan's seat,
You're
right?
in Alan's seat.
Levi Yitzchak, Yushad Levi Vayecha. Just as we are advised in Baba Batra 10 to give charity before commencing our prayers, so that the effect of this good deed will help to open the gates of heaven to our prayers, or to destroy a holistic term for obstacles that are between us and our Father in heaven, so the quality of our prayers will improve and eliminate the basic division between us, mortal beings, and God's immortality. Okay, how can you give charity before you start praying?
So,
Let's see.
well, we have a little tzedakah box right there.
Right there.
It's right there.
So
Yeah,
you
it's
could
right
do
there.
that at the Minyan, yeah,
So he doesn't mean on Shabbat,
no.
but I guess you could do it a different way. Maybe
Like at
not.
home, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I mean, at home, before coming to Minyan, you put a little coin in. So I mean, he's giving this idea you're doing it to remove the obstructions between yourself and God. But the way I would say it is to give you an open heart, right? You give charity, it opens up your heart, and then when your heart is open, it's a lot easier to pray too, right? Because you don't have any obstructions. Your heart is flowing. But if you do something, a good deed before praying, or open your heart before praying, it makes your prayer so much better. And I remember once before praying, this thought came into my mind, and I was walking by my dog, and I gave my dog a big pet, and somehow it really opened I just felt like this sense of love for our dog, for Momo, but it's true, it's like we're all stuck in our little lives and everything, and if before we pray, before we do something, we just come and open your heart, give a big hug to someone next to you, or a big, or a big smile.
Like I said hi to Janet, so I was
Yes.
praying. Now.
Well, it puts one in a good mood, right? It opens us up, opens up the flowing of spirit, and gets rid of all. Sometimes the obstacles you just feel inside yourself like you're stuck. You can't get through things. But then that reaching out and that generosity opens something else up. Morris, do you want to read the midrash?
Midrash, Vayikra, Rabbah, 34. Rabbi Yeshua taught, more than what the homeowner does for the poor person does for the homeowner. The verse says to no one, the name of the man for whom I acted today is Boaz. Who acted for me is not written here, but rather for whom I am.
So this is right after this. We just read this. Well, there's a reading, but
Yeah.
he did the mitzvah to her. She went and she collected grain in his field, but saying that it wasn't he did some great act to her, or rather she did a great act to him by allowing him to do an act of charity. So it's saying who's the one who really benefits from
Oh,
both.
We-
Both.
mhm.
I mean, there's a whole. I didn't include it here, but the Baal Shem, why both? First of all, why both? Why?
Ruth was able to get the
Great.
things for herself and for her mother-in-law. And Boaz had a good feeling about that, and told his people to leave the corners. Oh, not to clean the corners.
Yes. Well, there's a teaching by the Baal Shem Tov. It says that when you give charity, it's the coin is a letter Yud, the hand that's giving is a letter Hey, the outstretched arm is a letter Vav, and then the receiving hand is a letter Hey. So
It's in that Kabbalah chapter this week.
oh yeah, the last week, was it is, yeah. I mean, I've
Rabbi?
quoted actually. Go ahead, yeah.
I was just going to say, it's really hard to hear
Yes, yeah.
anybody except you.
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, you know what? Because it's not on the right microphone.
okay.
You hear better. You hear better now?
Let's see, Maury or Janet say something and I'll tell you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
people, it's not you, it's the other people in the room that are hard to hear.
I think it should be fine now because I changed it to a different microphone. It was on the laptop, which was very far from Janet, so it should be better.
Now,
But
Yeah,
so,
I think so.
but
Thank
that
you.
teaching, sure, of the Baal Shem Tov giving a coin and the receiving and the giving, it's saying that it's like there's a flow that happens, right? It's like Boaz and Ruth, and when they did this, it brought goodness into the world. It brought, what's God's goodness, right? So it brought, when you do this, it creates something special in the world, both for both parties, but it brings in something into the world that's a value for both. Anybody else on why it helps the person giving as much, if not more, than the person?
I have a question about that. Can I be heard? Okay,
Yeah, we
Yeah,
can
we
hear
can hear
you.
you. We can hear you.
thank you. I was just looking at the Hebrew text, and it says Asita, it says Imo, he worked with me. Uh, not, not, I acted for him, or it did, says Emo. Oh, I worked with him. I mean, at least that's the way I would understand it. But maybe it can be read either way, and the point is hard to make in the English without saying for me, for him. Is that right? I'm just trying to struggle with um
It's playing with
the
the
verse
ambiguity of
from
the
Ruth.
language. I mean, it could have said Shasa um Shehuasa imi, that he did for me, right? But
Uh-huh.
it's right. So but she said it's something I did for him. So what did he do? What did she do for him, right? Imo, even if it's with him, right? So you're right.
I
The
see.
with im is with rather than le, which would be for, or so you're right. But it's a little bit ambiguous because it's still a strange way of talking about it, right? It's not something he did for me, but rather something they did together or something.
Yes,
In other words,
okay. That answers my question, really. That I think that it shows that it can be understood that way. That's interesting. Thank you.
but it's true that the midrash is playing on something that's
Yes,
half there, which is always the case, right? So
right.
which is often the case.
Sure.
Um, but I mean, it might also point to, I mean, one of the qualities of Ruth in the story is her humility, right? And she's um uh, she has a different kind of way of approaching him. In my mind, it's hard for me to we read the book 2 days ago in shul. Was it just 2 days ago? Um, but I watched with my kids the Book of Ruth from 1961. So I recommend it if any of you have ever never seen it. The Book of Ruth. It's a movie, 1960s movie with an Israeli actress. Um, it's not the Ten Commandments, but
It was
it was good, and they try and bring the spirit. But the book itself has a
Yeah, but it probably stuck to it. Today, if they did it, they would have some modernized version of
but
it.
there is a modern version which I didn't even watch. But
I don't like the modernized versions.
Janet, would you be able to read for us our third source, Nahum of Chernobyl?
Of Chernobyl, Mio Elaine, Rehi.
Parsha, yeah.
Okay. The whole idea of giving the maser, the tithe, in the Torah was for people to realize that their inner happiness does not come from amassing more, but from giving away. By this mitzvah, they can come to the attribute and satisfaction and to true wealth. As we say, the person who is rich is happy with his or her lot.
And it's referring to physical. We talked a lot about that whole aspect last week. I don't want to. We had a whole conversation about being content with one's lot or not, and it's easier to say when one has what we need than when you don't have your needs. And we had the whole conversation, but um, here it's talking about that we're going to get more into this idea that um, we think that happiness comes from amassing more. I mean, that's just built into human beings, and we see in our society. And the more you have, the happier you're going to be. And we never stop. And we talked about this last week, whether in a very basic idea, I take a Divan Shava to the supermarket and they're like, I want this and I want this and I want this and I want this cake and I want this ice cream and I want this thing. Or, the people who many of us know who live in big mansions but are extremely unhappy and don't have basic satisfaction and contentment. And it is complex and it's not glorifying not having anything. But for the Hasidim, who, unlike us in our modern world where we do have many pathways to amass, they had no pathways, they had nothing but, the toil of their hands in the ghettos or in the shtetls. And so, and for 2,000 years, Jews did not often have a path to amassing more. And so the constant hunger for that was not helpful for them. And so we have this 2,000 years of teaching about being satisfied with your lot. But here the idea is even more about, we think happiness is in that, but there's actually a greater happiness in giving than there is in amassing. Yeah. So there's a happiness in giving when you give, you're able to give to others. And there's a whole teaching. I can't remember where it's from, but it talks about that the for those who are blessed with wealth, that it should be like water. If you keep it flowing, it doesn't dry up. You keep giving it away. Not to give everything away so you have nothing.
Yeah.
But I think of Rabbi Shlomo Karlbach, and he was known for this, and so he was in his heyday he was really a very well known singer. He'd go to these concerts and they'd give him his check, and here's a check for back then a lot of money, a few $1,000s and some person would come up to him and say, they would call him the holy beggars. Come here, Shlomo, I've never been to the land of Israel. Can you pay for my ticket? And he would say, here,
You would do it.
you would do it. You sign over a check, go to Israel, or I can't pay my rent. Wasn't very good for his wife and his daughter, but they also did okay. But him was even more, too much like water. But there's a sense of that open heart generosity. And for him, at least, he had his issues too, for sure.
But didn't it say
But
charity begins at home? Isn't that a saying?
Charity does begin, well, you got to take care of your family for sure, the best you can. But there's a power of open hearts is irresistible, right? And I mean, Shlomo attracted hundreds of thousands of people who just felt the power of that open heart, to define comfort and consolation, and that generosity of spirit, which often comes with the other as well. Would someone online like to read the next one?
Number 4.
Sure. I'll read.
Okay.
Rabbi Nachman, drawing complete divine providence is impossible unless one first shatters the desire for money. Its shattering is achieved through charity. For it is taught in the Zohar 3:22-24a, a ruach descends to allay the burning of the heart. When the ruach wind descends, the heart receives it with the rejoicing of the Levitical song. Ruach corresponds to giving, charity, which is indicative of a generous ruach, spirit. With this ruach, the burning desire for money is cooled. This corresponds to Psalm 76:13. He shall cut off the ruach of the nobleman, because the ruach lessens the desire for nobility and wealth. The Levitical song corresponds to engaging honestly in the give and take of business. He is happy with his lot and does not run to get rich. This is because song corresponds to the give and take, as is written, take up a song and give a timbrel, Psalms 81:3. And rejoicing refers to the one who is happy with his lot. And this is the aspect of the incense. It binds the hearts burning with the ruach. This is the meaning of incense makes the heart rejoice, Proverbs 27:9. It also corresponds to Deuteronomy 33:10. They shall place incense in your nostrils, because the aspect of incense nullifies the curse. By the sweat of your you will eat bread, Genesis 3:19.
So he's doing a lot of complicated Torah.
It is.
But there's interesting imagery here. And the basic idea that he has, right, is that the desire for money is what cuts us off from providence or from from godliness, from the universe, from connection to others. Because it's what makes that you put all your when all your mind is on money, it's hard to have your mind on other things. And how do you stop that when you have it? I mean, it's it's very strong, and I mean I have a family member, extended family member who did really really well for themselves, but then they had a stroke when they were 60 years old, and no he no longer everything he'd spent his whole life working towards couldn't enjoy it in his mind, and he no longer was able to really concentrate on uh, on his relationships. But you saw where was his mind? It was on everything he spent his whole money. So you'd go to visit him, and he wouldn't be like, "Oh, I'm so glad to see you." He'd be like, "This painting is worth $20,000, and this table is worth $40,000." Now that was like the reoccurring trope, because that's just where what your mind, what you train your mind to do, that's what your mind does eventually. And so it was very sad.
Yeah, Howard and
That's
I
it.
went to a party once on this beautiful rooftop in the city and introduced to this man. And he spent the next 10 minutes telling us how much money he had. It was like disgusting. I didn't even know this person.
Hmm.
Why didn't he tell me something interesting about himself? He just kept saying, "Oh, I just bought this house for X number of $1 million, and I took this trip that and it's exactly
Yeah,
the same
same.
thing." And so it made me wanna get away
Yeah.
from him.
Yeah, it doesn't, and if that's, and it's like, once you're in that mode, it's hard to not break free of that. And, we all have, I mean, it's easier that feeling of wanting to get more materiality.
Right.
With my kids, it's easy, right? Say, no, you can't have that ice cream. We move on to the next thing. And they complain for a second, and then they want the other thing. Say, no, you can't have it. And so eventually, they don't have, you don't
You
have
get
it. But if you've put your whole life, this is the only thing that matters. And we all have this. And for the Hasidim, this is a really big idea that, or that the desire for money cuts us off from the other more valuable pursuits. Um, and so this is interesting. How do you stop that desire? By being generous. And that when you go into that generous mode, it cuts off that desire to amass, and instead it shifts it, right? Um, and it's like, and actually this relative that I was talking about could be a time an extremely generous person too. And in those moments, the heart was amazing. I just felt such an open heart. Um, and so this is so it's talking about how it's almost like the spirit of generosity is a ruach, right? It's a spirit. And when that ruach comes upon you, then it just changes your whole being, right? It changes your whole mode, makes you feel completely different, right? Ruach descends to allay the burning of the heart. When the ruach descends, the heart receives it, rejoices, the Levitical song. So it's almost like when you're generous with someone, and we'll get to the last source of test, it's got to be real generosity, and so when you're really generous with another person, and for some people it's not as much in money. Some people have a lot of means, and they give within their means, and they don't. For some people, it is a very powerful gesture. For others, it doesn't open their heart because it's just become a habit. But when you do something, when you really help another person, that generosity, it really is like a rejoicing, right? You feel good in yourself. You feel a joy from the act of we're just human beings helping each other in this difficult world, being kind and seeing another person where they are. I often share the story of um, being part of this conference in Israel it was for world religious leaders. I was just a volunteer. It was way before I became a rabbi. And it was, the Archbishop of Canterbury and this person, and that's like really the highest level. And there was a Buddhist monk who was the the most important envoy of the Dalai Lama was there. He was a pretty young guy, but it was first time in Israel, and I was trying to help him out. It was a 3-day conference, and on one day, the volunteers had to get up early to set things up. And so I got up early, and I was just in a bad mood or something, and somehow he saw it. He looked at me, he was across the room and he saw it, and he came up to me, he grabbed me and he gave me a big smile, and then he walked away. And I thought that's generosity of spirit, it's a kind of giving, that kind of thing changes one's day. I mean, I think, and if it's coming from a true place, it can
Yeah.
even change even more than a day. It can change our mood that's been building for weeks or a whole month. And that kind of generosity is like a spirit, right? It's a ruach. It's like a come in you. It's like you opens up your heart. And there's a story of one of the Rebbes that they went to, they saw someone they hadn't known for many, many years, and they saw that person, and the person had lost everything. Terrible story to someone else, and it's going on about how terrible that person was. It took it from them, going on and on and on. Finally, the Rebbe said, Shmuel, you've got to know, like you're carrying, you're carrying all of you're carrying all of this, and it's eating you up. He says, "Here, have my clothes," and he takes his clothes off and give it, and then and the other person was so moved that it just opened up their heart, and they started weeping, and it brought a feeling of catharsis to the whole situation.
Can you talk about can we talk about the first line? Drawing
Yeah.
from divine providence is impossible unless you first shatter the desire for money. So
Mm-hmm.
is that saying that somehow God is going to, you can be closer to God? God's going to intervene more in your life? I mean, what are they really saying?
So that's a very powerful Hasidic idea, that this is what the Baal Shem Tov says, at least. Uh, if you give yourself completely over to God, then God will help run your life for you. But if you say, I got it, God, I got it, and God says, okay, you got it. I won't be involved. That's their thing. But it's very hard. You have to do it completely. It's a complete sense of surrender to what's there. And if you do it, then there's a sense of God acting with you, and being with you through it, which is the providence. Doesn't mean that suddenly God's gonna give you the Ferrari that you want, or even the Honda you want, but but there's a sense of inviting the providence as a spirit, as a sense of God's presence being a guiding force within your life. And so they talk a lot about how do you bring that complete providence. And so your desire for money means that you're right, you're making an idol out of your money, right? You're going to your money as the most important thing. And you're saying that's where I find my sustenance. That's what's providing for me. But if you can shatter that, then you can find. And I think we often feel this in our own ways, that when you do have this sense of generosity, and you do a real act of generosity, and you open your heart, and you feel the other person or other group of people's heart is open, suddenly you feel you're part of something greater. You feel there's something greater going on, because you're part of, it's just there. You're in your best self, they're in their best self, and it's like and that I think is one way of understanding providence, of understanding hashgacha pratit, which is that you're linked in, you're in harmony with life, right? That's to some degree what divine providence means, right? What's divine? What's God? It doesn't mean that God's on the throne and God is like a puppeteer, and you're going to, you're trying to open yourself to the puppeteer pulling at your hand here and pulling at your hand there and guiding you. I think it's more a sense of, well, the divine is underlying all of life in some ways. And how do you go into harmony with that sense of the spirit behind all life? When you're in harmony with it, then everything comes, right? This is what they say about the second paragraph of the Shema, which says, right, if you do what you're supposed to, the rains will come. But if you don't do what you're supposed to, the rains won't come, and you're going to be in a terrible place. So the Baal Shem Tov says about that, he says, well, it's not saying that the rains are going to change, but it's saying if you're in harmony with yourself because you're serving God and you're serving other human beings, then whenever they come, you'll find a way of dealing with it. You'll find a way of carrying it. It will be as it is. And even when the rains don't come, you'll find a way. But if you're in a terrible place, even when the rains come, you'll be like, ugh, the rains are here. And if you're in a terrible place and the rains don't come, you're like, ugh, the rains aren't here. And so sense of being in, if you can be in harmony with yourself and the rest of the,
I worked with
Yeah.
a man once who told me that all Jewish people complain. That's just what you said. If the rain's here, it's not good. If they are here, it's not good. And I don't think we complain any more than anybody else, what?
Just Jewish people.
that's,
That's what I said. That was.
Were they
his-
Jewish?
Gentile.
but they were not Jewish,
Yeah, he was Gentile. He said Jewish people complain all the time.
Yeah, we do.
we just speak up. The other people just
That's
keep it
a better
inside.
way of expressing it. You speak up.
Well, there's a whole passage in the Talmud where Tzachoni Hamagal, he was this miracle worker, according to the Talmud, who could make rain appear, right? So there was a moment where there was a drought, and he prays, he says, God, bring some rain. And so it starts raining so much, it starts flooding everything. He says, no, we don't want any more rain. So he says, God, stop. They're like, no, there's too little rain now. So
Yeah.
you realize, there's gotta be a medium amount of rain. Things have to be in the sweet spot.
Harvey
middle,
Gross, who was
so-
the administrator here,
Sure.
he had it down pat. A lady came in
Right.
the office one day and said,
It's
it's
too hot.
too cold,
Too
too hot
cold.
in here. So he said, okay, I'll take care of it. I'll
They-
make it cooler.
They do anything.
And then he didn't do anything, and she came back soon and said, oh, that was just wonderful. So, and Harvey laughed about it.
Yeah, well, it's often a reflection of our
Yeah.
inner state.
I think generosity, whether it's material or and this is on the heels of what has already been said. I'm not saying necessarily anything new, but I think when I think of it, it's a matter of creating connection with the human race and humanity. And it's I think something that Nancy said earlier, even too, it kind of, you throw good things out into the cosmos and good things come back. But I think so. I'm just going to share an experience I had. So,
Sure.
I have this, when I was working downtown, I had this thing where if somebody was asking for money, I would give them $1, as long as I had $1. When I ran out, that's all there was to it for that day. And there was a man, when I was working at Chase, there was a man, I would see him every single day. He was a homeless guy. And so I gave him $1 and we would, I would greet him, he would greet me. And this went over for a few years. And then I got downsized from Chase and I saw him going to the train one evening and I said, hey, you're not going to see me anymore, after such and such time, I've been downsized and blah, 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 blah. And, here's a homeless guy. I'm in a nice suit, briefcase, the whole 9 yards, right? Very different social strata. And when I told him that, he started, saying how he wanted to help me. And, and of course, his way of helping me was different than what, I would think of, that sort of thing. It was coming out of his existence. But still, it just struck me that here's somebody who had very little and I had a lot. But when I was in trouble, he wanted to reach out and help me out of his own experience and, his life. And that's, to me, that's giving and receiving love, I guess, in a sense. And that's also something that's kind of irreplaceable. And if you're focused on material things, those connections can't necessarily happen because to you, the material things are far more important than giving and receiving love. And I didn't expect I didn't expect the connection or what he said to me. It was just a very pleasant, wonderful gift that he gave me in return. And I also want to say, I think I think the purpose of mitzvah isn't to be a burden per se, but it's to open us up to the divine. It's to, because in my concept, or at least when I think of myself, I have lots of warts and things like that, and need to be improved and need to be a better person and need to connect better with the divine. And when I do good things, a variety of good things, it opens my heart. Not that the thing itself makes me better, but in the doing makes me connect more with the divine. I don't know, so anyway, those are my thoughts.
Well, beautiful. Thanks for sharing. Well, in Aramaic, the root of mitzvah means to attach. And so some of the teachings is that a purpose of a mitzvah is to attach us to the divine, right? So whatever the mitzvah is, it's attaching us. So I love your story and it's amazing you remember it all these years later, right? You remember that story. That story stuck with you, and that's a moment that stuck with you. Why? Remember when we were when I was in Nepal for that year doing social justice work, and my brother would spend 4 years there, and he would always say that, every year they get twice a year, they get a fresh batch of volunteers from Israel and around the world to help, one of the poorest countries in the world. And everybody would come, I'm going to help them. I'm going to help them. I'm saving the world. And they would quickly find, once they're in the Himalayan village or wherever they were, that it's not so easy to help people, and that, even if you give, how's it going to change someone who's stuck in who has the same job, it's not easy to help another. To actually change a person's life is incredibly difficult. And as they would always say, who are really embedded in it, that in Nepal at least, maybe it's different in other places, that those who really were easy to help had already helped themselves, had already found a way themselves out of their situation. That was in Nepal. And a lot of these had all kinds of ongoing things. It was very hard to help. And what they often found at the end of their 4 or 5 months is that they'd been helped more than the person that they'd gone to help, and that it was the interaction between the two, of the meeting of cultures, different lives, and sharing, that was the most enriched. And so maybe they were a little bit helpful. They brought some agricultural know-how that helped a little bit, or they came and helped the food supply for a while. But Nepal, a lot of this was caste system, and they were stuck in jobs for generations, and it's not so easy to get even one person out of it, and there are hundreds of thousands who are in the same place. And so it was the interaction of the two, and that moment that was life-changing for them, and for the person who was being helped, they got some kind of physical relief for a while. Hopefully it helped their life in some way. For the person who came to help, a lot of them ended up going in this direction for the rest of their lives, open up a life of service, going back to Israel and other places. And so it's okay, go
My
ahead.
experience as well.
Yes.
Mine as well too, Charles. Aren't you a Peace Corps volunteer? Ex-Peace Corps volunteer?
Yeah.
To Ecuador.
No, well, other places, but
Costa Rica
it was an
eventually.
experience, and there are things even if it's a small thing, if you sow a seed over the years, it may grow and turn into something else. So you may not see anything instantaneous. And I've seen those examples when some of my members of my group went and helped some folks restart a reforestation project. Very modest, but over the years, when my brother-in-law happened to be in that area years later as an assessor to the central bank, he said, well, someone sowed a seed. I said, yeah, it was probably us. And this whole area is reforested, and they've developed from that a renewable resource industry.
Oh, wonderful.
That's helped so many people. So sometimes you can't really minimize what your effort is. You may not see it immediately. And it may be you give somebody $1 or $5 or $10 when they really need it. And maybe that helps them get over a rough period, and then they can move on to something else. That's the way I feel. I know I've been through difficult times. And now that when I get into a better situation, I reflect. And so that's more or less how I focus when I help other people. I provide my modest contributions to some charity. And so,
Yeah, you never know. And the
no, you
fact,
don't. I don't know. There was another one, a gentleman in my group who went from Chile to Paraguay in the Peace Corps. One of his daughters, he went through a rough time because one of his young daughters died from infantile diabetes while he was in Paraguay. And that motivated him to go found a whole series over the years. Now it's been more than 50 years, developing a little bit at a time, a series of one-room classrooms and health clinics in the out in the way out into the jungle in very poor places in Paraguay, and that certainly had an impact over the years as far as the general health of the folks in that area and the children. So
well, it's amazing how, I mean, you hear often from people who maybe they suffered a loss, maybe when they were younger, and someone was kind to them from somewhere, and that left a trace, and then they want to return that, and over years they do so much to try and give back. That little act of kindness inspires them to then try and give back in these ways. And it's amazing how that tiny little act of kindness in a moment of difficulty, if it's heartfelt, can transform that generosity, whether spirit or physical, or someone helps you when you're really in the worst time and they give you a little bit, but somehow that little bit is just what you needed at that moment to then use it and to help you out and to go and then you pass it on to other people times 1,000. And well, let's come to the last source. Someone online like to read number 5?
Nachman of Bratslav, Likutei Maharan Tanina, number 4.1. When we give charity, the main task is to break our instinct to be cruel and turn it into loving kindness in order to give generously. When a person who is kind by nature gives charity purely out of instinct, it cannot be called an act of service of God. Why? Because they're kind by nature? In order to fulfill the mitzvah of charity in the proper way, one must first experience the battle of breaking his natural instinct to be cruel and turn it into love in order to give to charity. So charity has to be given out of love, not guilt or obligation or some other personal
Well,
motivation.
I think he's saying even that in his deepest way, that there's some ways in which some of us are generous and some ways in which we're not as generous. Whether some people may be generous with money, but not generous in how we treat other people, and that the breaking of that part of us we all have, where we are small or cruel, that's from his point of view the essence of the mitzvah of charity, to break that part of us that doesn't want to give. I mean, part of it, when I first read this, I thought of maybe more in the kind of, where if you're constantly being asked, sometimes one thinks, well, they're just going to use it for this or for that, so I'm not going to give to anybody. But sometimes one has to break the part of us that's stopping from giving. But I think he's talking about if you're kind by nature and you give charity naturally, then you've got that. It's good. It doesn't mean you should stop doing it, but that's not where your work needs to be. You've got that sorted. You passed that class, so to speak. But then there's where you need to do your work is the places where you're not generous, whether it's with certain people or family members or yourself or whoever it is, to find that generosity, because there's got to be that battle, the battle of breaking the natural instinct to be cruel. Yeah.
I think
The
that's,
battle. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go ahead.
Um, I think that's a very interesting and really a deep observation. And it's in a funny way, it's parallel, though it's different to, he's the Chassid, but it's parallel to what we used to call a Litvische approach, where there's the non-Hasidim uh, who would say, if you feel the joy of prayer, that's all very well, or whatever the act may be, that's the mitzvah. But it's doing it because it's your duty that counts. Otherwise, if you enjoy fasting, so be it, but it doesn't, you don't get no credit for it. I'm not saying these are the same thing, but it's an interesting parallel of saying what's really at stake and
Mm.
and following the logic of that, if that makes any sense.
No, it does. It's the Yeshayahu Leibowitz. I don't know if
Yeah.
you know him. He's an Israeli. He was a more moderate, more central Orthodox than Litvash. He was a thinker in Israel of 20th century, and he very much was in this. He said, you don't do a mitzvah to get joy. You don't do a mitzvah. You do it because it's a mitzvah. And all of Jewish life is very much in that mode of, you don't do something to get a nice feeling out of it. You do it because it's the right thing, and you just do it because you're told to do it. And that's doesn't so
Yes,
but it
Leibovich.
but it is interesting that the good feeling of joy comes from breaking your natural instinct, not just because you get joy out of doing it. But there's a sense which we've seen in so much of these acts of true self-transformation is very challenging, right? It's very difficult to really transform. Rabbi Nachman again says, if you can change one thing in your whole life, truly one thing about your character, you've done something incredible. That's how hard it is to actually truly change a piece of our character. But if you do that, it changes the whole world. And so that battle with that part of one, the instinct, which is to be cruel in whatever way it is, but to bring generosity to that place, to keep working at it, to keep bringing generosity, that's can transform one's life. And he's not saying don't give out of charity or don't feel good about charity, but the truest generosity is trying to bring generosity, change one part of us that's small and not generous. Again, could be to others, could be to our own self, and make that. And I mean, I see no one sees it. People, when a person is able to get over something, whether a feud with another person or a family member and truly make peace or something like that and break through all those natural instincts that's incredible. When that happens, it's really like something shifts inside a family or a person or community or nations. Wouldn't it be nice if the world could do a little bit of bring some of that generosity into it? Um, but what he's saying is that it's in when you're battling, then you're in the middle, you're doing what you need to do to make it happen. But um, we bring it all together. The sense that we're here to try and be vessels for that spirit of generosity in our world, and let it flow between us as best we can. And where there is a blockage, to work on the blockage and try and let that generosity flow ever further.
Off,
Yeah.
off.
Say again?
I've got a dog here.
Oh, okay. I was like, I don't know if floss. I said, but it's like a wind, it's like a ruach. And so opening our hearts, and right, in generosity he's connected to opening our hearts, and we open our hearts, and now lets the world be the way it should be. And so that's next week we're going to do our very last class, and God willing we'll be doing it on a whole, looking back at everything we've done. The Baal Shem Tov has a whole long teaching which is really interesting called the progress test, and he has a whole series of questions that one asks oneself. How do you know you've made progress in your life, that you've moved forward in all these different areas? And so yeah, he asked of one to ask these questions. And so we'll finish this whole section on self-transformation by going through the Baal Shem Tov's progress test. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank
I
you.
have
Thank
a
you very
question.
much.
Sure,
Is
sure, go ahead.
Thursday,
Yeah.
is the book study tonight? Because I didn't
The
get
book
an
study
email.
is tonight. Oh, you didn't get it? Okay.
No,
Yeah, it is.
okay.
Yes, I'll
Same
send you.
number as before?
It is, yeah.
Seven
Okay.
o'clock,
6:30.
6:30?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm? What's the
Inner.
Kabbalah?
It's a Kabbalah book.
Oh.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Always interesting to listen to everybody. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks for your contribution.